Trump administration to reinstate toppled Confederate statue, controversy and historic preservation, in a move that has reignited debates over the representation of Confederate figures in public spaces. The Trump administration has announced plans to reinstall a Confederate statue that was toppled and burned during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. The National Park Service, NPS, has confirmed that the bronze statue of Albert Pike, a Confederate general, will be restored and returned to its original location in Washington, D.C. by October. The statue, which was originally erected in 1901, has been undergoing extensive cleaning to remove corrosion and paint, with the aim of returning it to its former glory. According to the NPS, the restoration is in line with federal responsibilities under historic preservation laws and recent executive orders aimed at beautifying the nation's capital and reinstating pre-existing monuments. One such executive order, signed by President Trump in March, calls for restoring truth and sanity to American history. However, this decision comes amidst a broader context of significant changes and challenges facing the NPS. The agency has recently experienced unprecedented staff cuts and threats to nearly $1 billion of its federal funding under the Trump administration. Critics argue that these actions are part of a larger effort to sanitize and rewrite the country's history, particularly in ways that erase or downplay the experiences of marginalized groups. But here's where it gets controversial. The NPS has faced criticism for removing or editing content on its websites to eliminate references to certain historical narratives, including those related to slavery, women, African Americans, and LGBTQ+ individuals. For instance, in February, the agency removed references to transgender people from its Stonewall National Monument webpage, sparking outrage and leading to a public backlash. Similarly, pages about Harriet Tubman and a Black Medal of Honor recipient were restored only after significant public pressure. The NPS has also directed park staff to review gift shop items for content deemed anti-American, further fueling concerns about censorship and historical revisionism. The decision to reinstall the Pike statue is particularly contentious given its history. During the protests following the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, anti-racism demonstrators used ropes and chains to topple the statue and set it on fire on Juneteenth, the day commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. Floyd's death sparked a nationwide movement against systemic racism, leading to the removal of over 300 Confederate monuments across the country. At the time, President Trump, who was in his first term, quickly condemned the toppling of the statue, tweeting that the D.C. police were failing to protect it and demanding immediate arrests. He later instructed that the statue be restored, a directive that is now being carried out by the Department of the Interior. The Pentagon has also followed suit by restoring Confederate names to several Army bases, a stark contrast to Trump's earlier stance in 2020 when he vowed never to consider such a move. The Pike statue has long been a source of controversy, much like other Confederate monuments across the United States. Many of these statues were erected long after the Civil War as tools of intimidation against Black Americans and symbols of white supremacy. Pike himself was a prominent leader of the Freemasons and a figure associated with the Ku Klux Klan, though the Masons dispute this connection. The statue, located in Judiciary Square near the U.S. Capitol, was built at the request of Masons who lobbied Congress to grant them land for the monument, with the condition that Pike be depicted in civilian clothing rather than military attire. Despite years of campaigning by civil rights activists and local government officials in D.C. to have the statue removed, the federal government's approval was required to take action. In response to the NPS's announcement, Eleanor Holmes Norton, D.C.'s House delegate, has vowed to reintroduce her bill to remove the statue and donate it to a museum. "I've long believed Confederate statues should be placed in museums as historical artifacts, not remain in parks and locations that imply honor," she stated. The decision to honor Albert Pike by reinstalling the Pike statue is as odd and indefensible as it is morally objectionable. Pike served dishonorably. What do you think about the decision to reinstall the Pike statue? Is it a step towards preserving history, or does it perpetuate harmful narratives? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The controversial return of Albert Pike's statue in D.C. In a surprising turn of events, the statue honoring Confederate officer Albert Pike, which was previously toppled, is set to make its return to Washington, D.C. This decision comes from the Department of the Interior, and the statue is expected to be reinstalled in Judiciary Square by October. The Washington Post was the first to break this news, highlighting that this restoration is timed just a year before the nation celebrates its 250th anniversary. President Trump has expressed his intention to commemorate this significant milestone with various tributes to American history, as outlined in his executive order titled Making the District of Columbia Beautiful. In this order, Trump emphasizes that monuments, museums, and buildings should reflect and inspire awe and appreciation for our nation's strength, greatness, and heritage. The contributions of Pike to the historical narrative of the United States certainly align with this vision. A spokesperson for the Department of the Interior stated, "This project reflects our commitment to the responsible stewardship of public lands and the preservation of our nation's cultural resources," reinforcing the idea that the statue's return is part of a broader initiative to honor historical figures. However, the backdrop to this decision is fraught with tension. In 2020, following the tragic murder of George Floyd by police officers, demonstrators took matters into their own hands and removed Pike's statue. This 27-foot-tall bronze and marble monument was originally erected in 1901 to commemorate Pike's role as a brigadier general in the Confederate Army and his prominence within Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Additionally, Pike was affiliated with the Know Nothing Party, a group notorious for its staunch anti-immigration views. While the Trump administration celebrates the statue's reinstatement, local leaders express strong opposition to its return to public view. Eleanor Norton Holmes, DDC, articulated her stance clearly, stating, "I've long believed Confederate statues should be placed in museums as historical artifacts, not remain in locations that imply honor. A statue honoring a racist and a traitor has no place on the streets of D.C." Moreover, the D.C. Scottish Rite, which had previously supported the statue, acknowledged in 2017 that it had become the subject of contention and escalating controversy, indicating a willingness to agree to its removal. This ongoing debate raises important questions about how we choose to remember our history and the figures within it. Should controversial statues be preserved in public spaces, or is it more appropriate to house them in museums, where they can be contextualized? This is a conversation that continues to evoke strong feelings on all sides. What are your thoughts on the matter? Do you believe that such monuments should be displayed in public, or do they belong in a museum setting?